My elementary teacher said I'd be a failure. Now her son works for my $8 million company. Hey Reddit, I've been lurking here for years but never posted anything this personal before. After some recent events, I felt like I needed to share this story because it's been weighing on me. This is about revenge, but maybe not the kind you'd expect. Back in 5th grade, I had this teacher named Mrs. Lucina Hendricks who absolutely despised me. I was one of those kids who asked too many questions and got bored easily with the standard curriculum. I'd finish my worksheets in 10 minutes and then start daydreaming or doodling in my notebook. Mrs. Hendricks took this as personal disrespect. She had this way of making me feel completely worthless. Anytime I'd raise my hand with a question that went beyond what she was teaching, she'd roll her eyes and say things like, "Jacob, you need to focus on the basics before you try to run." But the worst part was how she'd talk to my parents during conferences. I remember sitting in that tiny plastic chair while she told my mom and dad that I lacked focus and discipline. She said I was too scattered to ever accomplish anything meaningful, and that I showed all the signs of someone who would struggle through life. My parents believed her because she was the authority figure. They started treating me differently after that, like I was already a disappointment at age 10. The comments got worse as the year went on. When I'd get excited about some science project or book I'd read, she'd shut me down in front of the whole class. "Jacob, you need to learn to follow instructions before you start thinking you're some kind of genius." The other kids picked up on her attitude and started treating me like I was stupid too. The final straw came during parent-teacher night in May. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I'd forgotten my backpack and came back to get it. I heard Mrs. Hendricks talking to another teacher in the hallway about the problem students in her class. She said, and I'll never forget this, "That Jacob Fernando boy is going to end up flipping burgers somewhere. He's got no discipline and no respect for authority. Mark my words, he'll never amount to anything." I was 11 years old and I went home that night feeling like my whole future had been decided. My parents had already started treating me like I was destined to fail, and now I had confirmation that even my teacher saw no potential in me. Fast forward about 6 months and my family moved to a different district. New school, fresh start, but Mrs. Hendricks' words stuck with me. The difference was, my new teachers actually encouraged my curiosity. Mrs. Thompson in 6th grade let me do independent research projects when I finished my work early. Mr. Walsh in 7th grade helped me enter a regional science fair. By high school, I was taking advanced classes and working part-time at a local computer repair shop. The owner, Gary Peterson, noticed I had a knack for troubleshooting and taught me basic programming. I spent every spare moment learning new coding languages and building small programs. College was a mix of business and computer science classes. I worked internships every summer, saved every penny, and graduated with a solid understanding of both technology and how to run a company. By 25, I'd started my own software development firm with 2 friends from college. The company grew slowly but steadily. We specialized in custom database solutions for small businesses, nothing glamorous but profitable. By 30, we had 12 employees. By 35, we'd expanded into mobile app development and had offices in 3 cities. Last year, we hit $8 million in annual revenue. Which brings me to why I'm writing this post. 3 months ago, my HR director Jennifer Kim came to me with a stack of resumes for a junior developer position. One name jumped out immediately, Lucas Hendricks. The resume listed his education, previous jobs, and at the bottom, emergency contact information. Lucina Hendricks, listed as his mother. I stared at that paper for a long time. Lucas was 28. Which meant Mrs. Hendricks had probably been pregnant with him or had him as a toddler when she was busy telling me I'd never succeed. The irony was almost too much to handle. His portfolio was actually pretty impressive. Clean code, good problem-solving skills, experience with the frameworks we used. By any objective measure, he was qualified for the position. But I'll admit, my first instinct was to toss his resume in the trash out of spite. I sat on it for a week, going back and forth. Jennifer kept asking about the position, and I kept making excuses about needing to review more candidates. Finally, my business partner Rachel Gonzalez asked me what the holdup was. I told her the whole story about Mrs. Hendricks and how she'd made me feel like a failure at 11 years old. Rachel listened and then said something that stuck with me. "So you're going to prove her right by making business decisions based on childhood grudges?" She was right, of course. Acting out of petty revenge would make me exactly the kind of person Mrs. Hendricks had predicted I'd become. I called Lucas in for an interview. He was polite, professional, and genuinely talented. During our conversation, he mentioned that his mom had been an elementary school teacher for 30 years before retiring. I asked if she'd enjoyed teaching, and he lit up talking about how proud he was of her dedication to education. I offered him the job. For the first few weeks, I treated Lucas like any other employee. He was good at his work, collaborated well with the team, and fit in with our company culture. But I found myself watching him, waiting for some sign that he'd inherited his mother's judgmental attitude or her certainty that some people are just destined to fail. It never came. Lucas was genuinely nice, worked hard, and treated everyone with respect. He'd stay late to help solve difficult problems and always volunteered for the less glamorous projects. Within 2 months, he'd become one of our most reliable developers. That's when I started to feel guilty about my motivations for hiring him. About 6 weeks into his employment, Lucas mentioned during a team lunch that his mom had been asking about his new job. He said she was proud that he was working for a successful local company and kept asking about the CEO. She's always been interested in success stories, he said, especially people who built something from nothing. I nearly choked on my sandwich. The next week, our company was featured in the local business journal for our expansion into artificial intelligence consulting. It was a big article with photos of our office and interviews with key staff. Lucas brought a copy to work and said his mom had seen it and was impressed. She apparently kept the article and showed it to her former teaching colleagues. That night, I went home and looked up Mrs. Hendricks on social media. Her Facebook profile was mostly pictures of her garden and posts about her grandchildren, but I found what I was looking for. 2 weeks earlier, she'd shared the article about our company with a caption that read, "So proud that my son Lucas works for such an innovative and successful company. Their CEO Jacob Fernando is truly inspiring." Jacob Fernando. She didn't remember me. I sat staring at my computer screen for an hour, processing this. The woman who had convinced me I'd never succeed, who had filled my childhood with doubt and my parents with disappointment, didn't even remember my name. I'd carried her words for over 20 years, let them drive me to prove her wrong, and she had no idea who I was. The next morning, I called Lucas into my office. I told him I wanted to increase his responsibilities and put him on our artificial intelligence development team. It was a promotion that came with a significant raise and the chance to work on our most cutting-edge projects. He was thrilled and grateful. But I also told him I had a personal favor to ask. I said I'd grown up in the same area and wondered if his mom might remember me from when she taught at Riverside Elementary. Lucas said she'd probably love to hear from a former student and offered to arrange a meeting. I said I'd like that. The meeting happened 2 weeks later at a coffee shop near the old elementary school. Mrs. Hendricks walked in looking older but recognizable. She'd always been a small woman, and now she seemed almost fragile. She smiled warmly when Lucas introduced us and said how exciting it was to meet the CEO of the company where her son worked. We chatted for a few minutes about the business and how much she enjoyed hearing about Lucas's projects. Then I mentioned that I'd been a student at Riverside Elementary in the early 2000s and asked if she remembered me. She looked thoughtful for a moment, then apologized and said she taught so many students over the years that faces and names sometimes blurred together. I prompted her a bit more, mentioning the year and some of the other teachers who'd been there at the time. She started to look uncomfortable, like she was trying hard to remember but couldn't quite place me. Finally, I said, "You told my parents I'd never amount to anything. You said I'd end up flipping burgers because I had no discipline." The recognition hit her like a physical blow. Her face went pale and her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Jacob Fernando. Oh my God, I remember now." The silence stretched uncomfortably long. Lucas looked confused, glancing between his mother and me like he was trying to understand what was happening. Finally, Mrs. Hendricks spoke again, her voice shaking. "I said that? I actually said that to a child." I nodded. "You said I showed all the signs of someone who would struggle through life. You told another teacher I'd never amount to anything, and I overheard you." She started crying right there in the coffee shop. Not quiet tears, but full sobbing that made other customers turn and stare. Lucas reached over to comfort her, still looking confused about what was happening. Through her tears, she kept saying, "I'm so sorry," over and over. She said she didn't remember saying those specific words, but she believed me because she remembered going through a difficult period during those years. Her marriage was falling apart, she was dealing with budget cuts at school, and she was struggling with depression that she didn't know how to handle. "But that's no excuse," she said. "There's no excuse for crushing a child's spirit like that. No excuse for making you feel worthless when you were just curious and eager to learn." Lucas finally understood what was happening. He looked horrified and kept apologizing on his mother's behalf. But I told him he had nothing to apologize for. His mother's mistakes weren't his responsibility. We sat there for another hour while Mrs. Hendricks told me about the guilt she'd carried from her teaching years. She said she'd realized later that some of her difficult students were actually the brightest ones who just needed different challenges. She'd tried to track down a few former students to apologize, but most had moved away or she couldn't find them. I became a teacher because I wanted to help children succeed, she said. Instead, I damaged some of them. I damaged you. I told her that her words had motivated me to prove her wrong, so in a strange way, they'd contributed to my success. But she shook her head and said that wasn't her doing. Your success came despite me, not because of me. You succeeded because of who you are, not because of anything I said or did. Before we left, she asked if there was anything she could do to make amends. I told her the best thing she could do was be proud of Lucas, who was an excellent employee and a good person. She promised she would be, and she thanked me for giving him the opportunity to work for our company. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, Mrs. Hendricks has sent me 2 handwritten letters apologizing again and thanking me for treating Lucas fairly despite her past behavior. She also made a donation to our company's scholarship fund for local students interested in technology careers. Lucas has become one of our best developers. He's working on a machine learning project that could revolutionize how small businesses manage their inventory systems. He has no idea that I initially hired him partly because of who his mother was, and I don't plan to tell him. He deserves to succeed based on his own merits, not because of some twisted sense of justice I was working through. I've been thinking a lot about what this whole experience means. For 20 years, I carried Mrs. Hendricks' words like they were some kind of prophecy I had to fight against. They shaped how I approached school, work, and business. In some ways, her cruelty did make me more determined to succeed. But meeting her again, seeing her genuine remorse and the pain she still carries from her teaching years, I realized something important. She wasn't some evil person who set out to destroy children. She was a struggling adult dealing with her own problems who took them out on the kids in her classroom. That doesn't excuse what she did, but it explains it. The revenge I'd fantasized about for so long turned out to be hollow. Seeing her break down in tears didn't make me feel vindicated or powerful. It just made me feel sad for everyone involved. The child I'd been who internalized her cruelty, the adult she'd been who was too damaged to recognize the damage she was causing, and the adults we'd both become who had to reckon with the past. Lucas is thriving at our company. He's getting married next month to his college girlfriend, and they're buying their first house with the money he's making from his promotion. Mrs. Hendricks calls him every week to hear about his projects, and she brags about his work to anyone who will listen. I realized that the best revenge isn't making someone suffer for their past mistakes. It's succeeding so completely that their opinion of you becomes irrelevant. It's becoming the kind of person who can hire their child and treat them fairly, who can face the person who hurt you and respond with professionalism instead of cruelty. Last week, Lucas asked if I'd be willing to speak at a local elementary school's career day. He said his mom had suggested it, thinking the kids would be inspired to hear from a local entrepreneur. I said yes. I'm scheduled to speak at Riverside Elementary next month. Mrs. Hendricks won't be there. She's been retired for 5 years, but some of her former colleagues will be. I'm going to talk to those 5th graders about following their curiosity, asking questions, and not letting anyone convince them they're destined to fail. I'm going to tell them that success isn't about proving your childhood bullies wrong. It's about becoming so secure in your own worth that their opinions stop mattering. It's about building something bigger than your resentments and creating opportunities for people who might never get them otherwise. Mrs. Hendricks was wrong about me, but not in the way I thought for 20 years. She was wrong because she let her own struggles make her cruel to children who needed encouragement. But I would have been wrong too if I'd let her cruelty make me cruel in return. Lucas just knocked on my office door to show me the prototype for the inventory management system. It's brilliant work that's going to help hundreds of small businesses run more efficiently. His mother should be proud of him, and she is. That's the only revenge that matters. Thanks for listening, Reddit. Sometimes you need to tell your story to strangers to understand what it really means. Update. A lot of people in the comments have been asking about the Career Day speech and how it went. I gave the presentation last Friday, and I wanted to share what happened because it was both better and more complicated than I expected. The Career Day was held in the same multipurpose room where I used to eat lunch 25 years ago. They'd updated the decorations and added new technology, but the basic layout was identical. I found myself looking around for the corner table where I used to sit by myself, reading during lunch because the other kids had picked up on Mrs. Hendricks' attitude toward me. There were about 60 fifth graders packed into the room, plus several teachers and parent volunteers. The principal, Dr. Angela Foster, introduced me as a local entrepreneur who'd built a successful technology company. She mentioned that I was an alumnus of the school, which got some excited whispers from the kids. I started my presentation with the standard stuff about following your dreams and working hard, but about 10 minutes in, I decided to tell them the real story. I talked about being a student who asked too many questions and got bored with regular assignments. I explained how some adults made me feel like that was a bad thing, like being curious and eager to learn meant I was destined to fail. The kids were really engaged, especially when I mentioned that one of my teachers had told my parents I'd never amount to anything. You could hear the sharp intake of breath from some of the adults in the room. I saw a few teachers exchange uncomfortable glances. I told them that those words hurt me for a long time, but eventually I learned something important. Other people's limitations aren't your limitations. Just because someone can't see your potential doesn't mean it's not there. One kid, a girl named Sophia Brooke, raised her hand and asked if I ever got revenge on that teacher. The room went dead silent. I looked out at all those expectant faces and realized this was the moment that mattered most. I told him about Lucas, about how his mother was that teacher, and how he now works for my company. I explained that the best revenge isn't hurting people who hurt you. It's succeeding so completely that their opinion becomes irrelevant, and then using that success to help others. The teacher who said I'd never succeed was wrong, I said. But if I'd spent my energy trying to make her suffer instead of building something meaningful, she would have been right after all. After the presentation, several teachers came up to talk to me. One of them, Mrs. Sandra Reeves, had actually worked with Mrs. Hendricks for 15 years. She said Lucina had talked about me after our coffee shop meeting, and how much guilt she carried from her teaching years. Mrs. Reeves told me something I didn't know. Mrs. Hendricks had struggled with severe depression during the years she taught me, following her divorce and her father's death. She'd taken early retirement partially because she realized she wasn't able to be the teacher her students deserved. That doesn't excuse how she treated you, Mrs. Reeves said. But she spent the last 5 years volunteering with literacy programs, trying to make up for the damage she thinks she did. She probably helped more kids learn to read in retirement than she did in her last 10 years of teaching. Dr. Foster asked if I'd be willing to come back and speak to the teachers during their next professional development day. She said they needed to hear about the long-term impact their words can have on students. I agreed, but I asked if I could bring Lucas with me to show them what happens when a student is supported and encouraged. The most surprising moment came at the end of the day. As I was packing up my presentation materials, a boy named Kevin Fernando, no relation, despite the name, approached me. He was small for his age, with thick glasses and a nervous demeanor that reminded me of myself at that age. "Mr. Fernando," he said quietly, "my teacher says I ask too many questions too. She says I need to focus on staying caught up with the class instead of worrying about extra stuff." My heart sank. 25 years later, and some kids were still getting the same message I'd received. I knelt down to his eye level and told him that asking questions was the most important thing he could do. I gave him my business card and said if he ever wanted to learn about programming or technology, he could email me. His face lit up like I just handed him a treasure map. I drove home that day thinking about cycles, how damage gets passed down from teacher to student, how adults dealing with their own problems sometimes take them out on children, and how those children grow up carrying wounds they don't know how to heal. But I also thought about how cycles can be broken. Mrs. Hendricks broke hers by retiring when she realized she was hurting more than helping. I broke mine by choosing to help Lucas succeed instead of sabotaging him. And maybe Kevin will break his by remembering that curiosity is a gift, not a flaw. Lucas sent me a text that evening. His mom had heard about my presentation through her old colleagues, and she wanted to thank me for saying kind things about her despite everything. She also wanted to know if there was anything she could do to support the students who might be struggling with teachers who don't understand them. I suggested she volunteer with our company's mentorship program for local kids interested in STEM careers. She said yes immediately. Final update. It's been 6 months since I posted this story, and I wanted to give everyone a final update on how things have developed. The mentorship program with Mrs. Hendricks has been incredibly successful. She's been working with 12 local elementary students who've shown interest in technology and science but are struggling in traditional classroom settings. 3 of them, including Kevin Fernando from the Career Day, have built their first simple websites under her guidance. Lucas got promoted to senior developer last month and is now leading our artificial intelligence division. His inventory management system launched in February and already has over 200 small business clients. He still doesn't know the full story of why I hired him, and I don't think he ever needs to. Mrs. Hendricks and I meet for coffee once a month now. Not as friends exactly, but as two adults who've learned something important about forgiveness and moving forward. She's told me about other former students she's tried to track down and apologize to. Some have forgiven her, others haven't responded to her letters, and a few told her they didn't want to revisit the past. The most significant development happened 3 weeks ago. Kevin Fernando, the boy who reminded me so much of myself, sent me an email with a program he'd written. It was a simple calculator app, but the code was clean and well commented for someone his age. At the bottom of the email, he wrote, "Thank you for telling me it's okay to ask questions." His teacher had told his parents he was too advanced for his own good and needed to focus on grade-level material. Kevin's mom contacted me after she found my business card in his backpack. She wanted to know if there were programs for kids like her son who seemed to understand technology better than their teachers did. That conversation led to the most important outcome of this whole experience. Our company has partnered with the school district to create an after-school program for students who need more challenging material in science and technology. Mrs. Hendricks volunteers as a coordinator, and we've recruited several other local tech professionals to serve as mentors. The program launched last month with 18 students. Kevin is one of them, along with Sophia Brooke, who asked about revenge during my presentation. She's turned out to have an incredible aptitude for database design. I've learned that revenge fantasies are usually about powerlessness. When someone hurts you as a child, you spend years imagining scenarios where you're finally strong enough to hurt them back. But real power comes from being strong enough to break the cycle entirely. Mrs. Hendricks was a struggling adult who took her problems out on children. I could have become a successful adult who took my old pain out on her family. Instead, I chose to become someone who creates opportunities for kids like I used to be. That's not forgiveness in the Hallmark card sense. I don't pretend that what she said didn't hurt me, and I don't think her intentions matter more than the impact she had. But I've realized that carrying anger is like carrying poison. It might hurt the person who wronged you, but it definitely hurts you. Lucas is getting married next weekend. He asked me to be in his wedding party because he said working at our company had changed his life. Mrs. Hendricks will be there too, crying happy tears and taking too many photos like mothers do. I'll be thinking about the 11-year-old kid who heard a teacher say he'd never amount to anything, and the 40-year-old man who hired that teacher's son and helped him succeed. Somewhere between those two people, I figured out that the best revenge is not needing revenge at all. Kevin sent me another program yesterday. This one calculates compound interest and includes a feature that shows how small investments grow over time. He included a note saying he wants to start a business someday, just like I did. I wrote back and told him I'm sure he will.